Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, so we are still go.
Okay.
Again, the last minute issue, Vishnu, as you said, that came down to about a minute or two before they would have had to call this thing off. They worked out. Just to recap, if people are just tuning in, essentially was trying to upload some weather data to the top of the capsule that the capsule would have needed in case the launch abort system had to be activated during launch. That did not happen. They apparently got the data just in the nick of time to the capsule. They were able to arm the launch abort system, and then they were able to start fueling. So they will fuel this rocket right down to the very last few minutes, even last few seconds before launch time. Then essentially power transitions to the rocket, to the Falcon 9 and the SpaceX capsule, and then the computers fire up, and then these astronauts are headed skyward. I mean, all of this is going to happen very quickly. It really, there's really not a whole lot that typically, I don't want to jinx it, but there's really not a whole lot that typically goes wrong in these last few seconds. Once they start fueling, they see very quickly, is fueling going successfully? It is. And so typically they top off the tanks, and then they go. Transfer power, set up the ground launch sequencer, and then they lift off.
All right. So just in terms of what's happening inside the crew module at this stage, the visors, Pallava, my colleague here, tells me likely to be down at this stage. They'll be going through their final checks. But essentially at this stage, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, it's all automated, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's funny. My photographer and I, we were just talking because obviously we're recording the feed that that we're watching from Axiom and watching for movement inside the capsule, watching for movement outside the rocket. The thing is, for the last hour and a half or so, there's really nothing going on. Now it's just the computers in mission control and the team, those 4 astronauts who are now facing skywards because their seats have retracted, because they want NASA and SpaceX and also Axiom, as they lift off, they want the G-forces to go through their chest as they're laying back instead of straight up and down. Other than that, they're not doing a whole lot. Maybe running through some of the procedures. They have iPads strapped to their knees. This is an entirely automated process. I mean, I know we have a pilot. I know he's your pilot, but there's not a whole lot to do because this sequence, as I said, the ground launch sequencer takes over in the final seconds before the countdown, and this rocket essentially flies itself to the International Space Station. It can even dock autonomously with the space station, but most of the time it is the pilot that guides the spacecraft as they start to get close to the space station, within proximity, with a controller. And that is, of course, a very precise process, because you certainly don't want to knock into the space station. That would be a major problem. But getting there, they're just going to sit back and they're just going to enjoy the ride and look skyward. The reason that their visors are down now is because, again, if, God forbid, the launch abort system must fire, the kick in the seats is just, it's got to be unbelievable. Probably better than the best roller coaster in the world.
Do we know what G-forces that would be, Eric? I mean, if they had to use the crew aboard, upwards of 6-7 G at least.
It's got to be. I can tell you, I flew with the Air Force Thunderbirds here in an F-16, and we hit 9 Gs in a very tight banking turn, and that was just about all I felt my body could handle. Yeah. So, I know it's up there. I know it's really intense because think about this, Vishnu. So, again. Not a scenario we like to talk about, but certainly a scenario that SpaceX and NASA have planned for. This is why the launch abort system exists. But if there were some major anomaly, and we have seen some, not with people on board the top of this rocket, but the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, there was an incident several years back when they were fueling and the rocket exploded. So Elon Musk tweeted right after that, and he said our launch abort system is so good that it was a satellite that was on top of the rocket at the time, but had there been the Dragon crew capsule with astronauts inside, they would have instantaneously been blasted out of, as I said earlier, harm's way. So these thrusters fire up in milliseconds. I mean, you blink and the capsule is already lifting off because, of course, an explosion is instantaneous, except what SpaceX did when that happened several years back, they slowed the video down, and you could see that capsule would have had time within milliseconds to lift off by the time that the rocket started to disintegrate and might have put anyone in danger had there been a capsule on that rocket at the time.